Hi, before I get started, I just want to give a special shout out to somebody that this community of Edinburgh, Pennsylvania lost recently, and his name was Nate Bruno. He was the kind of guy that always had a smile on his face, a positive mental attitude, and no matter how bad things were, always moved forward. In that ability, he had that rare ability to make you feel better no matter how bad you felt. R.I.P. Nate Bruno. My name is Cosmo Barbaro, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the table saw. I want to go over technique a little bit, and I want to go over the different types of blades and what they do. I'm not going to change them out or talk about changing them out too much, but I will talk about, how high the blade should be and where your pressure should be and what, like I said, the different blades will do. And I see a lot of bad technique on the internet. There's a saw company called SawStop, and they make a variety of horsepower saws, but this saw I'm talking about is the 3 horsepower saw they make. It's, from what I understand, a very good saw. That mechanism is amazing, and what happens is if your finger hits it, and they use a hot dog to demonstrate this, the blade instantly goes down. The mechanism sucks the blade down so you won't cut your finger off. And when I see these videos of the SawStop working, I notice that people are doing really silly things on the table saw that you shouldn't do, and to avoid an accident, if that makes sense. So when I see these videos, the technique most times involves a piece that's, far too small to run on the table saw, or the cutoff piece, and that's another thing. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. So right now, right here, I have in front of you, and this, incidentally, this is a 3 horsepower Delta Unisaw. It is an excellent table saw. It is not a SawStop. It will cut your finger right off. So your technique must be perfect every time. And this machine doesn't care how good you are or where you're from. You must do things correctly because it does its job correctly. So if you follow these basic rules, you'll be very productive and you'll be very safe on here. So my saw right now has got I'm just running a combination blade because I cut a lot of different foam. I had to pack some furniture and I was cutting plywood. But typically for hardwood, what you're going to want to run is a 24 tooth blade. Now the company Freud is very good. I recommend them. But just to give you an example, this is a type of ripping blade. This is to rip boards lengthwise. You must have the right blades on for the right operation. So this would be ripping a board, 24 teeth for this blade. And the reason is the angle of the teeth are forward, and being that they're 24, it's an aggressive cut, and in being that the cutter head is angled forward, it's designed to scoop material out fast. So this is for ripping down the length of a board. When you go to cross cut a board across the grain, you're going to want to use a 60 to 80 tooth bit, 80 tooth preferably. This is a 60 tooth. This is a cutoff blade. Incidentally, all these blades are carbide tipped. 60 to 80 teeth for cross cutting is a general rule. I don't do much cross cutting on here because I have a Hammond glider. Most people have a chop saw that they'll use, but again, this is for cutting across the grain. And also, the angle of this tooth, again, is aggressively forward. And then, like I have on here, a combination blade basically is a group of blades that run together, and the teeth alternate with a flat one in between, if that makes sense. So what a combination blade does is it does everything okay. It'll cut hardwood okay, it'll cut plywood. As long as your blade's sharp, it's fine for ripping. But if you're going to do a lot of ripping, you're going to want to put a resaw blade on. Now here's where things get a little bit different. If you're going to rip plastic, you're going to want to get this blade. This is a non-ferrous blade, and this is also good for, this is really particularly made for aluminum. Now, if you look at this blade closely, so I can get it there. It's got a negative rake. And the reason it's got a negative rake on it is because the material is harder and it's scraping as opposed to scooping. So this has I believe 80 teeth, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 80 teeth. And this is a non-ferrous blade. So these are just some examples of the different types of blades. I put one carbide tooth above. Some people put the whole gullet through or up all the way, but you know, I put one carbide tooth above the material. You don't want to be too high. So if my board is 1 inch thick, I don't want to run it. I don't want to run it like this, okay, where I have 2 inches up. I want to run it with just one carbide tooth up. So I'm going to set that here, okay? So now I'm set. So when I run my material and I pick my dimension, you have a distance where it shuts down, and then you got to use a push stick. So the rule of thumb is 6 inches and under. You should be always using a push stick. You should you should try to avoid doing this. Okay, this is a good way to cut your fingers off. And the other trick that I want to just show is not messing with the cutoff piece. So let me just get set up here and I'll make a couple cuts. I'll use foam is a good example to show you because of the way the cutoff piece is moving. I can't really get hurt, so it's kind of nice. So let me just do a couple cuts and I'll show you my body position. So I've got it set. My drive hand, I'm going to drive on a diagonal. This hand's going to hold the material through. So that's the motion, okay? This is your guide hand holding the material through. Now, when you cut this material and you're passing it through, if it's extra long, you want to make sure you've got an extension table or something to catch it so you're not holding on to it. That's another way accidents can happen. And finally, it's very important to make sure you clear the blade. I've seen people just leave the material touching the blade and then they'll have a kickback. And a kickback is when the piece essentially comes out and hits you. That's what a kickback is. So I see people on YouTube doing this kind of stuff, and here's where people get into trouble. Anytime you're ripping a rectangular piece, it's gonna want to automatically, just by geometry, come away from the fence. So my rule of thumb for stuff like this is cross-cut it. Try not to cut it this way, but if you have to cut it this way, you got to make sure you keep this dead tight against the fence, or you'll have an accident. Now, let me just show you if what you do with this cutoff piece. Did you notice that when I ripped this piece, that cutoff piece didn't hit me, it went past me? That's because of my body position. So it's very important you know where your body position. There's only a couple times where you have to stand in this alley, and that's when you're ripping larger things on this. And this saw really isn't, for sheet work. So ripping larger things can be done, but that's probably a better operation for like a panel saw. So let me show you let me just do one more cut with this. And now when I'm ripping this piece through this hand, it's very important not to touch this cutoff piece. And that's where people get in trouble. They go to reach for this cutoff piece and the cutoff piece gets caught by the material and it pulls your hand right into the blade. So being aware of where your hand position is crucial at all times. So I'm going to rip this piece, watch this cutoff piece. I'm going to not pay any attention to it. My focus just is on this piece solely. So body position. Another thing is this blade is still spinning. I see people a lot of times reach for the material as this is coming to a stop. So you make sure this blade is stopped as you're reaching around to pull this material out. You're better off walking around the saw to get it. So now I'm trying to think what I'll do next. What I'll do next is a piece of plywood. And I'll rip it this way, which is a little bit awkward. So in this case, I got to make sure I keep this dead tight to the fence. Let's just do this. Okay, so that's just a random width for no reason. So now I'm gonna push diagonally, push across, holding this material here, making sure I keep this hand back and not paying any attention to this cutoff piece, but only to this business side. Okay, let the blade come to a stop before you touch the cutoff piece. And that's pretty much it. Now, this is where people get into trouble. They try to rip stuff like this on the table saw. Don't rip stuff like this on the table saw. This is where you're gonna get into trouble doing stuff like this. Oh, so if you wanna rip thin stuff, that is totally doable. And let's say you're doing a bent lamination. So let's say I'm gonna cut, I need 1/8 inch pieces. I don't know for what reason. Now I'm gonna use plywood. It's not really a good indicator. Or maybe I should use, no, I'll use some mahogany. Let's see if I can do it this way. So in this case, I'm gonna bring the blade up, 1 carbide tooth above the material. And in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this cutoff, or this push stick, I'm gonna hold it dead tight to this fence, and I'm gonna control this little piece, and I'm gonna cut this little strip through here. And I'm gonna run this a couple times. Now I got a little squirrely there at the end of that last cut. So if something goes wrong and you're cutting, what you need to do is your hands go up instantly. Your body position is such, if the piece kicks back, it'll go past you, you're okay. Now, this is a tricky operation. This can be a little bit dangerous, but if you use a push stick, if you watched me, I felt honestly quite safe. The material's protecting me, my technique's protecting me, and now what you have in this case is, if I can do it like this, equal material now, that's all the same thickness. So if you want to do, if you had like, let's say a lamination, and you want to do a general bent lamination like that, that's how you would do it, okay? So that's how you rip the same thickness material on the table saw. Now, let's say that you are left-handed. You would have to set your saw up to be left-handed, meaning you'd have to make sure you either ordered a specialty saw that had the holes drilled in it, or you would have to tap and drill the holes on this side so you could move this extension table over here. Incidentally, this is a Biesmeyer fence. It runs the width of this. This would have to be reordered for a left-handed saw if you're going to run that way. But let me just show you, on this saw, you can cut to the left of the blade. The principles are the same, but now my body position changes, and now my drive hand is my left hand. The technique is the same. Drive hand, this hand holds the material against the fence, and when I'm driving, like it looks like I'm pushing straight, but I'm actually pushing like this, diagonally across the blade. With this drive hand, okay, this hand never reaches across. Never reach across with your opposite hand that's holding material. You never cross over the blade with your hands, if that makes sense. Okay, just to give you an idea. Plywood's not really any different. I've got the combination blade on here. So I'm good to go. What plywood will do is there's a lot of glue in here, so it's not ideal for like your ripping blades. It's not a big deal, but you'll have to clean up the excess if you're cutting a lot of stuff. So usually I'll run a combination blade for if I'm doing a carcass work that is specifically plywood or a man-made material, for instance. So again, the first thing you do is you walk up to the saw, you set the blade. Now I know my blade is 90 degrees, but you would actually set this and make sure that it's 90 degrees. Otherwise, all your edges, if you're edge gluing, are going to be off. So it's not a big deal. You set this, make sure it's 90. Next thing you do is you adjust the height. Okay. And now I'm going to pick a random width here for no reason. And I'm going to attack this piece, holding it, drive hand going across. So it gives a very nice cut. Technique, technique, technique. It's super important. This saw does not care that I have a lot of experience. It will cut my fingers off the same way it'll cut anybody else's fingers off. So you got to be diligent and know your technique. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.